Welcome to the Global Future Mobility Virtual Conference. In this panel session, we will be discussing the topic, the current state of connected, autonomous, shared, and electric mobility, or known as CASE. According to recent statistics reported by Forbes, by 2030, there will be 700 million connected cars, 90 million autonomous vehicles, and 250 million electric and hybrid vehicles on the roads. That's a lot of millions. These vehicles of the future are changing how we travel, how we plan our journeys, and the infrastructures of the cities we travel in. I will introduce our panel speakers to elaborate on this topic. We have Charlene Consolation. Charlene Consolation founded the Smart License Plate Vault, the Big Vault, to store your car key, providing remote access to cars for purposes such as in-car delivery, roadside assistance, and enabling seamless automotive services within the vehicle. Our second panel speaker is Oliver Walker-Jones. Oliver is the spokesperson for Lilium. He previously led the global communications function for Rolls-Royce Aerospace Division. Nominated as one of PRWeek's 30 Under 30 in 2015, he also held communications and government affairs roles with Walmart, LafargeHolcim, Blackstone, and the CBI, the UK's leading business lobby. Welcome, Charlene and Oliver. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. It's our pleasure to be here.
So I'm going to ask Charlene first. The smart lockbox, the Big Vault, providing remote access to cars for purposes other than just driving, so storing things and all. It's really cool. Could you tell us more about that?
Yes, thank you. You've already done my job by saying the whole context. So yes, you're absolutely correct. The very main concept is providing remote access, right? We started by having this huge problem. I've been in the car industry, the automotive industry for a decade, and there is this huge problem with the technology factor, which is remote access, because not every car is capable of that. Even if it's connected, which in 2025, we assume that 80% of vehicles will be connected, it still does not really automatically have the ability to have that remote access. But the industry is going to that mobility services where the car becomes the hub, not only for just automotive services, but anything that can move the goods or people between from point A to point B. And the car could be an urban locker where we can store not only people, but goods and other services. So the Big Vault not only provides remote access, but also gives you this peace of mind, because the remote access is monitored in a way that you know who's accessing it. And before you get that access, you have to pass some type of due diligence from the company. So we're basically forwarding a mobility as a service platform in a way that the vehicle is the central hub of all these movements.
And what I like about a Big Vault is that it's the add-on is just something small. It's the plate, so there's not much to spend on. No huge infrastructure change. Nothing huge. It's a really simple solution that really fully utilizes the use of a car, which is what we already have. Moving on to Oliver. Oliver, Lilium is developing a revolutionary on-demand air taxi service that is powered by the all-electric vertical takeoff and landing that's set to be fully operational in 5 years. Now, how does the certification by the relevant authorities look like? 5 years isn't that far.
Yeah, it's probably 4.5 now as well, as we're halfway through 2020. So I would start just by explaining a little bit about what it is. So it's a 5-seater aircraft. As you said, it's fully electric. It takes off and lands vertically and then transitions to normal flight. So when it comes to certification, it's certified by the same people who certify aircraft that you get on today. And we plan to certify it to the same standards. So it'll be as safe as the sort of aircraft that you would go to an airport and fly on today. That's kind of point one. Point two is, because it's already going to be certified in a world where people have certified aircraft like this before, the standards are basically there. So our aircraft has two sets of wings, much like you'd see on a normal aircraft, and it has propulsion like a normal aircraft. And actually, to begin with, it will have a pilot as well who will be qualified like a pilot in today's commercial aircraft. So the basis for certifying the aircraft is broadly there. What we have to do to actually certify our aircraft is, of course, to fly it, to test it, to do all of the hundreds of hours of flight testing you need in order to certify. Where we're at today, well, we have a demonstrator aircraft flying. We have it flying at speeds of more than 100 kilometers an hour already. And that's a third of our total speed of 300 kilometers an hour. And so we'll develop that technology demonstrator a bit more. We'll bring more demonstrators and more prototypes together, and we'll keep doing that flight testing. Now, providing that testing goes according to plan, we will get to the point where we certify the aircraft in time for operations in 2025.
Okay, I think that's really exciting. Me and Hanis, we organized the Global Drone Conference. And so Lilium, it looks like it's something that we're really into. Let's talk about car sharing. So we're expecting people to get more tasks done using their cars, like what Charlene said, more than just getting from point A to point B. People now are using mobility service, which is changing the way citizens move around the cities. I want to ask Oliver, do you see a change in trend due to the pandemic as people are more wary about sharing vehicle?
Yeah, so I think obviously we're a long way from operations, but I think there's been a definite shift in the way that people want to travel through this pandemic, and some of that will stick, not all of it. I think we'll see a return to a lot of normal forms of transport, but some of that will stick, and people may want to move around in different ways, and shared vehicles is one example of that. And we hope as well that in a 5-seater aircraft, people will perhaps want to travel more in those than they do in the 200, 300, 400 seaters that you might see today. But in the longer term, I don't know that it'll have a hugely critical effect. I think what's going to be much more of an effect is the point that I think both of us are making here, which is that shared ownership of vehicles or making better use of an asset is something that we definitely already seeing more of, and we need to see more of. It's a great way to improve positive environmental impact. And if that means people share cars rather than own them, if it means that they share our vehicle rather than owning it, that's exactly the future that we want to see. Some of it will be the pandemic, but some of it's to do with the environment too.
Charlene, anything you want to add on this? Here in Malaysia, now we just lifted off the restriction movement yesterday, and people now can move between states. And even before this, when it was a bit lenient to move around, people are already continuing on e-hailing, Grab here. Do you have anything you want to add on, Charlene?
I agree with Oliver that I think this is temporary, and that in the long term, the people will still go to the car sharing because that's the very limited ways of going around. But I think for me, the question is, how long would that be? Because we don't know when this pandemic would end or it would come back. So as a company, like where we are right now, is that I'm working with corporations where we have been talking about what can we do today until to the point that we go back to normal to make people feel secure to come back to the normal life again. So I think, yeah, this is going to be temporary.
Okay. Collaboration is necessary. So this is what I hear you talk about too, Charlene, between sectors, between private industry and government, between security professionals and consumer experts. So you've been in the automotive technology industry for, like you mentioned, a decade. Can you share with us how important is partnership and collaboration in leading us to real transformation in mobility experience?
So not only it will expedite the project, but we are able to use both of our resources for a corporations like car manufacturers and logistics companies who have this certain expertise, and to a startup or a medium-sized business who's offering a technology. If we work together, both weaknesses and strength can be used to move forward, and actually much more faster. And I've seen this a lot for over a decade. And the good news about it is that for the past 5 years, the automotive industry are more lenient to collaborating to startups more than ever, because they understand that with the bureaucracy and the culture of these huge corporations, a startup is actually the one that is that igniting that innovation and moving towards that mobility as a service. So I'm glad that the industry is changing and shifting towards this direction. We have a lot of collaborations already within the automotive industry. So I think it's a good timing for everyone.
And how is Lilium in terms of partnering and collaborations?
So we have a vision of delivering regional air mobility. And to do that, you need three things, right? You need an aircraft that you can take off and land. You need somewhere to land it, so kind of like the landing pads. And then you need people who operate it. So it's kind of like taking like a Boeing or an Airbus today, the people that make the aircraft, adding in an airport and an airline, and all three of those things in one. So inevitably, there will be a great deal of partnership in what we intend to do. And we haven't announced many of our partners yet, but we have some really great conversations going on in the background. We're very conscious that we can't do all of those things, right? We want people to have a very special experience, and we're going to design the aircraft, we're going to design the experience. We won't always operate it. So whether that's property developers or people who do the maintenance of aircraft, or people who might actually operate an airline service for us, there's going to be a whole ecosystem that develops here of people that want to get involved and support us in making this a reality.
Yep, and airports also will need to restructure how they operate. Okay, autonomous vehicles. Okay, is there anything you want to add just now?
Oh, I was just going to say, airports are really obvious places for us to go and operate.
Yeah.
We're not operating overseas. We're not operating really long distances. So
Yes.
we won't be replacing what happens at an airport, but actually having a landing pad like ours next to an airport. Just think of your local airport. They are always away from the city center. If we can
Yes.
make a really quick way of people getting to and from the airport, then you open up the world to them. And that's really important.
And I also know some places that their method of commute every day is actually by plane when they go to work between islands and such. So this is
Cool.
where I could see it first. So
Yeah.
autonomous vehicles generate vast amounts of metadata data. The question is, who owns that data? With many parties having a stake in such data, so there's conflicts of interest will be unavoidable, putting customers' privacy at risk. So Oliver, this question is for you. How can automakers match consumers' needs with autonomous driving solutions while overcoming skepticism about giving up privacy and control of the vehicle?
So I think it's a really valid question, and it's only one that we're starting to explore in our business. So we intend to have autonomous flights in the future, but we retain the aircraft, right? So we'll be operating the aircraft, which means the data can belong to us. When you break that back into what that means for communities or people who might own a vehicle and then or travel in a vehicle, and the autonomous data or the data for the vehicle gets thrown back, then that becomes a really interesting question, one that I think we haven't necessarily landed the answer to. So for us, it's not actually a direct concern. It's not one that we want to, one that we need to worry about so much. I think probably though for the car sector, it's going to be defining, right, as to where the data sits and who protects it. And I think the most interesting bit will be to see how different parts of the world deal with it. So I think if you look at privacy laws in different parts of the world, they're protected in different ways. And I think we'll see some divergence in the early years of how people actually manage that data. And there are some really good examples of how data privacy laws are working in Europe versus the US, for example. And I think we'll start to see those divisions become clearer. So I think we might have a moral position, each of us, but I think the reality is that the difference that comes up in the world, that's going to be fascinating to watch.
Charlene, is there anything you want to add? I know data is huge for you.
Well, I mean, Oliver said it very clearly. Yes, I mean, we have different moral value propositions, especially between North America and Europe, but it's a matter of using that data in a way that actually forwards the customer experience, and as opposed to exploiting it in some others.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I mean, it's just a matter of time how it will prevail, especially with the division between Europe and North America with the data privacy concerns.
Even in the best of times, automotive companies are capital intensive and fare worse than most other industries in terms of economic value creation. While investing in CASE related technology, like what you both are into, what are the factors that investors are looking at? Why don't we start with Charlene?
Well, I would say that this has been different even before COVID-19. But so since we have
Okay.
to get into the reality about COVID-19, so this is what I have been learning for the past 3 months is that the investors are now looking for companies that is just more than with this case, CASE, right? Now they wanted to understand how can this play part post COVID-19, because according to some of our investors, 90% of their portfolio companies that they've invested in probably are no longer relevant. They'd even call it before COVID-19. So now we have to add into a proposition that will this be needed? Especially we've learned a lot so much during this time that remote access, remote work are actually possible, and now it has just accelerated these type of needs, and the investors are looking for this. Is this needed post COVID-19?
Oliver, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is if you think that automotive companies are capital intensive, I can tell you that aerospace companies are even more capital intensive, mainly because of the safety measures and the lightweight nature of the materials that we need to use. Autonomy will play a really big part in making this sector super appealing and super affordable. Now, the business case actually works really well anyway, before you get to autonomy. And that business case works because we're flying people rapidly at 300 kilometers an hour. We're doing it with 4 passengers and a pilot on board. There are no traffic jams to get stuck in on the way. So you can kind of keep the intensity of the journeys up. And equally, electric power is significantly cheaper than the jet fuel or the kerosene that we're using in aircraft today. So we can deliver a business case where our aircraft can compete with today's form of transport that is kind of closest to it. So if you're traveling, for example, from New York to Pittsburgh, or if you're traveling from London to Manchester in the UK, or if you're traveling from Hong Kong to Macau, then we will match pretty much the price of whatever it is that you were going to use before, whether that's a catamaran service or a high-speed train or a car. We're going to be competitive. But if you add in autonomy, you get an extra seat, and you take away a lot of the human costs, then actually this becomes not just reasonable and affordable, but actually really kind of appealing to consumers. And then if they're working from home, if there's coronavirus and they want to live in a different part and they want to commute into San Francisco twice a week, or they want to transfer into Manila twice a week, then suddenly you change the way that they live, because they can travel quicker and they can travel more eco-friendly, and they can do that autonomously. Then this is going to be a world where actually we can rethink the way that we travel. And if you can put that form of transport in, then maybe in some places you take away the need for roads or for rail. You don't need to invest in that infrastructure anymore, the high-speed infrastructure. And therefore, you save yourselves not just the money that you invest in that, but also the carbon impact of laying down things that run through green areas at the moment. So we see autonomy as being a real enabler to making this universally accessible.
Yes, and I imagine also distances between KL and Singapore, Malaysia and Singapore. Some people work and live, so they live in Singapore, but then they work in KL. They commute daily.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really good example, right? Yeah. For us, I mean, because you take away the need for that travel, you can do it much more quickly. You can do it at an affordable price. It's a really good use case, I think.
Before we end our discussion, is there anything you and Charlene, do you want to add before we wrap up?
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm very excited about what Oliver is doing. I'm very excited. I live. Well, it's a personal choice. I live in a suburban. Although our office is in Silicon Valley, in the heart of Silicon Valley, my personal choice is live in suburban to kind of just like get out of that chaos. But also there is a huge, like there is a sacrifice where I have to drive 2 hours every day to get to Silicon Valley. So, okay, all right. I'm really excited about what Oliver
There
is
you go.
doing.
See,
And
we can help you.
2025. Yes, I mean 2025. I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting for you. Hopefully
And
it's
then
more
I
than
would
that.
just add, I would add one point on the end of this, which is if you consider what Charlene is working on, where you ease access to cars as a shared facility. Just imagine if you're considering making a journey in the future and you're traveling up to 300 kilometers, you're going to use a Lilium jet for those longer distances, and you probably don't need a car sitting on your drive every day because we can fill that gap for you. However, you probably, for journeys that are less than 25 kilometers, maybe 30 kilometers, maybe 40, you are going to want a car, but you're probably not going to want to own the car. And if that's the case, then you're going to want the technology that companies like Charlene's are developing, right? Because you can open up that asset to everybody else. So a future where you have flying taxis, but also shared cars, and maybe you don't own them anymore.
Yeah.
Yep. And I also like how Big Vault is solving a problem that is really huge now, which is what's it called? Porsche stealing, where packages are stolen from Porsches, right? And that's such a huge thing. So a simple solution is just to deliver it in your car, which is already there. All right, and
Pretty
that
cool.
is it. Thank you, Charlene and Oliver, for sharing your insights
Thank
with
you.
us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
To
Thank you.
our viewers, please continue to share your opinions and you can chat in the chat box. We'll be back in 15 minutes to discuss the topic, the fate of automakers. Will the giants crash?